The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
The hype around CJ Carr has been building since the day he committed.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
We are turning our focus to redshirt freshman CJ Carr. I'm going to dive into why his talent and upside could make him the best option, why his lack of experience might hold him back, and finally, my take on whether Carr will actually win the job or if he's going to have to wait his turn a little bit longer. But let's get into the case for CJ Carr to be Notre Dame's starting quarterback. I think the first one is pretty obvious. He has the highest ceiling of any quarterback on the roster. He has 5-star traits across the board. He's basically the ideal size for a modern quarterback, 6'3" and a lean 210 pounds. He's very polished despite the fact that he is the youngest quarterback in the competition. He has a quick, easy release that's technically sound. You could just tell he's been trained really well, right? His grandpa's Lloyd Carr. His dad was a backup quarterback at Michigan. Like, football runs in their family. They take it very seriously. And you can just see in the way that Carr trains that he has been training to be a college quarterback, to lead a program for a very long time. This isn't something new. This has been something that he has been working for since really he was a little kid. And that is very clear in his progress and in his development as a quarterback who is still very young. He might not have the arm strength of a Josh Allen or a Jamarcus Russell, but he certainly has the ability to layer the ball, throw a touch, and he can really put the ball anywhere on the field. Like, he came out during pregame warmups before the national championship, and he was throwing darts on 25-yard outs. It was pretty funny listening to Tim Priester, friend of the program from Irish Illustrated, talk about watching CJ Carr just throwing in warmups. And this is a guy who had not really thrown that much over the past several months because he's been dealing with an injury. We'll get to that injury in segment 2. But he's very impressive, especially considering the fact that he is still so young. He just has a ton of raw talent, and that is evident every time he throws the football. Like, I made the point that Kenny Minchie might have the best quarterback aesthetic. I think he throws a very pretty looking ball, but I think Carr is the most consistently accurate of any of the quarterbacks on the roster. It's not just his throwing ability, though. I think he's got like the perfect skill set for a modern college quarterback. He's a polished pocket passer, but he also has the ability to extend plays and move the chains with his legs. Like, you can't really just have a pocket passer anymore at any level of football. I think that type of quarterback is sort of aged out of the game. You need to be able to use your legs, be an athlete, and Carr is certainly an underrated athlete. He's not going to be used a ton in the designed run game. It's not going to be like Riley Leonard, but he is certainly capable of keeping it on a read option, and he provides an element of unpredictability to the offense. Like, defenses will absolutely have to take into account his running ability when they're defending him because he can tuck it and run it. You saw that on his high school tape. He was more than willing to do that. We saw him in the spring game last year run a little bit, but he can make throws on the run. He can make throws off platform, and we saw that in the spring game last year. He played for both teams in that game, and he was really the story of the game. He finished 15 of 23 passing, 165 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. His touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert was probably the best play of the day because he threw him open and had to split 2 defenders who were bearing down on the receiver. Now, granted, we should point out that he wasn't playing the ones out there on defense, but still, it took guts to throw that ball, and then he executed it perfectly. He can loft the ball deep, but he also can throw a rope across the middle as well if he has to. And he hit Deion Colsey in stride across the middle on a play in the second quarter. It was actually really fun going back and rewatching a lot of the plays from that spring game, and you realize just like, wow, Notre Dame has so much talent in the quarterback room. And that is not something we could say just a couple years ago. Think back to 2022. Things have certainly changed for that room, and Carr is another example of the young talent that they're bringing in to really improve that room as a whole. So I think when CJ Carr has the ball in his hands, like, he is in total control out there. There were times where he held it too long and got sacked, but he's never running around for his life, okay? And he's going to make some early mistakes. That happens, but I just love his command when he's out there on the field, and I think it's because he's poised and mature beyond his years. And he was like that as a true freshman. Now going into his redshirt freshman season, he's already shown leadership. He's shown that he's confident and that he has a high football IQ that could allow him to handle the pressure of being the starting quarterback right away. That is not easy. And as I mentioned earlier, he comes from a football family. His grandpa won a national championship as the head coach at Michigan. His dad was a backup. He understands what it takes to succeed at this level. He has seen it all of his life. Like, none of this stuff is brand new to him. It might be, the experience might be new, but he's seen it. He knows what it takes. And his entire life has been spent around the game. And you could tell from the way that he played in high school that he has a very high football IQ. They ran a pretty advanced offense for his high school in Michigan because he was capable of running it and leading his offense. And he also showed natural leadership ability when he was a recruit, because he was the leader of that class. And you always want your best player to be the leader, and that was certainly the case for CJ Carr in his recruiting class. And I think one particular moment really stands out to me. When Tommy Rees left to take the job at Alabama, that was a big blow to CJ Carr, because I know that everyone thinks that Tommy Rees couldn't recruit quarterbacks, and certainly he missed on a few of them, no doubt about that. But Tommy Rees and CJ Carr had a great relationship. Rees really wanted Carr. Carr loved Rees, and it felt like they were destined for a bright future at Notre Dame. But then Rees takes the job at Alabama, and I think that CJ Carr had to really reevaluate his situation because he had formed such a strong bond with Tommy Rees. But he had also developed a strong relationship with Marcus Freeman and believed in his vision. But around that time, that was when the whole Andy Ludwig debacle happened, and Notre Dame botched that offensive coordinator search on a very public level, right? We all remember that. That was not a whole lot of fun when Colin Klein turned him down, and then they bring Andy Ludwig to the hockey game. Everyone thinks it's going to be him, and then he doesn't get the job because of the whole buyout and all that whole thing. And then Notre Dame had to essentially settle with Jared Parker to be the offensive coordinator. And I don't imagine that CJ Carr and Jared Parker had a very long-standing relationship prior to that. CJ Carr could have wavered at the time, and maybe he did privately. Maybe he really reconsidered his options and whether or not he should go to Notre Dame because of the way that was handled. The first season under Marcus Freeman didn't go that well on the field because they went 8-4, and there were reasons for CJ Carr to have questions about the future of the Notre Dame program. He didn't know that they were going to be playing for a national championship in 2 years, but he didn't do that. He kept the class together. He remained steadfast in his belief in Notre Dame, in the direction that this program was headed. And not only that, he rallied the other recruits around him. And I think that says a lot about his character and also his leadership ability, because for whatever he was feeling internally about the situation, he certainly never let that get public. And he led the class the whole way, helped recruit other talented players to come to Notre Dame. And you love to see that, right? Because there was a moment last year when Notre Dame was recruiting Deuce Knight pretty hard, and it looked like he was the leader in the class. But then he strung them along, was taking all those visits to Auburn, but was not being fully transparent with Notre Dame. Like, that was a mess of a situation. That never once happened with CJ Carr, even though Notre Dame gave him reasons to waver. And I just think that really stands out to me, and the way that he handled that whole situation was just extremely mature. So it's not just his talent and his ability. I think that what he possesses just as a person and as a leader, like, that's what you need in a quarterback. And if Carr is truly the future of Notre Dame football, I think getting him on the field early could accelerate his development and set the Irish up for long-term success. Like, the best case scenario for CJ Carr, one that would be great for him and great for the Notre Dame football program, is that he follows the path of other great quarterbacks to come through college in recent years, like a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. Both players redshirted their freshman season, and then they came in as the starting quarterback in their second year as redshirt freshmen. They played 2 seasons of terrific football in college. Then they were the top players selected in the NFL draft. Bryce Young backed up Mac Jones in 2020. Then he started the whole season in 2021. And in that year, just his second year in college, he threw for 47 touchdowns, nearly 5,000 passing yards, and just 7 interceptions. CJ Stroud appeared in just 2 games in 2020, sitting behind Justin Fields. Then he won the starting job in 2021, threw for 44 touchdowns, 4,400 passing yards, 44 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Bryce Young became the first overall pick after his 3rd season, and CJ Stroud was right there behind him at number 2 overall. This is the best case scenario, but it's also proof that you can come in as a redshirt freshman and dominate right away. Notre Dame has not had a quarterback drafted that high since Rick Meyer back in 1993, and they have not had a quarterback drafted in the first round since Brady Quinn in 2007. Carr might have the best chance to break that streak, and if he's able to beat out 2 guys who are older than him in just his second season, he might be well on his way to reaching that status.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, how about you combine those live bets into a same game parlay? I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps me in the moment. Every exciting bounce of the ball, every late game rally, every clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you get paid, and when you win, you get paid instantly. You get paid. You get paid. As we draw closer to the NCAA tournament, now's a great time to take a look at the Final Four odds. Auburn and Duke lead the way, -150 and -115. My goodness. Maybe a more intriguing play. The Terrapins of Maryland at 10-1. Analytics love the Terps, as well as the Kentucky Wildcats, who sit at 8-1 to make the Final Four. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
The Florida Gators have hired their secondary coaches.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
We'll start with Darren Wilson on paper, right? Now, I'm trying to do this with as much of just on paper and information that I've been given when I ask people for responses on players or coaches or whatever it may be. But Darren Wilson on paper, we can look at this and say, because again, when we talk about recruiting ties for guys that don't have extensive recruiting experience, because while Darren Wilson has been on coaching staffs for 8 years, some of those were a GA. And especially 8 years ago, 7 years ago, GAs weren't doing much of the recruiting work, right? So when we talk about the recruiting stuff for Darren Wilson, there's really not much. So we're going to connect some dots, right? He's from Louisiana. That should help recruiting there because a lot of recruiting is not just, oh, are you a good salesman? It's, do you relate to me? You know, are you someone that looks like me? Is that kind of representation there? Because if it's not, that matters. That creates new barriers. It doesn't make things impossible, but it does make things more difficult. And so with Darren Wilson, you've got the Louisiana ties of now Louisiana players will probably relate to him better than they would have related to even Will Harris or any other of the DB hires, right? So, which I will also say this for Florida and the state of Louisiana specifically, LSU did not do a good job this past recruiting class of keeping players in Louisiana, which is a thing that they have historically been. I'm going to say this, okay? LSU has, well, and by historically, I mean like the past like decade plus, LSU has had maybe the biggest stranglehold on a state than any other program because it's just LSU as the Power 4 program and for a while Power 5 program. It was just LSU. Texas, you know, there's Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M. There's other schools in the state. Florida, there's the Big Three, and now UCF. Georgia, there's at least Georgia Tech. Alabama, Auburn. California, there's USC, UCLA, Stanford. There's all these schools in all these states, but Louisiana has always been LSU. And this year was the first time that they really did a bad job of retaining talent in state. Now's the time to strike when they're still reeling from that. And so Darren Wilson could go in there and steal a kid out of Louisiana if there's a blue chip player that he's interested in. So there's that. He played at Southern Miss, which Mississippi is not just like, oh yeah, there's 25 blue chips out of Mississippi every year. That's not the case, right? There's a few blue chips, but they're really good football players. And I think that it was I think Mississippi has the highest blue chip player per capita or whatever it is, just because there's not like Mississippi's not a densely or heavily populated state. But considering that, they have a pretty decent number of blue chips for a not well-populated state. Playing at Southern Miss, I'd imagine that, especially paired with saying, hey, I'm here on behalf of the Florida Gators, would help you get in the door of those high schools. Having that tie of, hey, I lived here for 4 years while I went to college and played football in this state. I came from out of state to come here. I'd imagine all that plays a part, right? So Darren Wilson, on paper, should be able to go into Louisiana, should be able to go into Mississippi, and should be able to, of course, go into Florida and recruit there. He's got defensive coordinator experience for 2 years at McNeese State, which honestly, I don't even care how it went. I don't care about any of that. And I spoke about this yesterday. For me, it's just really tough to judge a guy hardly on what he did at the place when he was there for 2 years, right? Especially when it's not a place that I'm tied into and always looking at. Like if it's Florida, I could judge a guy based on a year, even 2 years. Like I'll hear things about them. I'll know about them. I'll be able to give my opinion live as things are happening. But what he did 5 years ago at McNeese State, not going to be able to give a valid opinion there, especially when I know how things played out. Arkansas. Let's get to Arkansas, where he was for 2 years. I don't care about any recruiting things, whether good or bad. It means nothing to me with Arkansas. And you'll hear me talk about this a little bit tomorrow on the portal with Brian Smith, where, and I'll probably put it on Locked On Gators as well as a bonus show, but you'll hear me talk about that, where Arkansas, I don't care anything about recruiting in Arkansas because, one, they've been dealing with the same thing that Florida's been dealing with as far as like Billy Napier being on the hot seat. They've been dealing with that with Sam Pittman. All right. Every year they think Sam Pittman's going to get fired, and he should absolutely be fired before Billy. Let's get that clear. So there's that. NIL, horrible at Arkansas. They can spend the money. They have people that are willing to spend the money. They've spent it on coaches with basketball, right? But they don't with football, and they've consistently lost players because of NIL. I can't fault his recruiting for that, right? Like, I can't say he's a good or a bad recruiter if they're not willing to pay kids. So I say all this to say that on paper, Darren Wilson should be able to go into multiple states and establish some sort of pipeline there. On paper, Darren Wilson has defensive coordinator experience and is coming here and was recently hired to be a defensive coordinator again and is coming here to be a position coach. On paper, this is a really good addition, right? And the thing is that the only question mark I truly have about him is the recruiting. On paper, he can go out there and go into multiple states and have some kind of leg or foot in the door, right? But it's about actually going out there and doing it. Like, you do still need to be a good salesman. Even in the era of NIL, when you can buy players, you still do need to be a good salesman, because the way that recruiting usually works is not usually, oh, whoever pays me the most, that's where I'm going. It's, these are the 8 schools that I'm willing to go to. Whoever pays me the most from these is where I'm going. That's how it goes. So you still have to get yourself into that list where you can go, hey, fine, we're in the list. Let's pay and let's get them. Like that's what you got to try to do there. That's the part where it's like, you got to be a good enough salesman to get the kids. That's where it comes in. So for me, it's just about actually seeing him put it into action recruiting wise. Again, I've spoken to multiple people at this point, and they've all said positive things about him. They've all complimented him as a person, as a coach, all that. Now it's just about putting it together as recruiting. I feel good about him as an on-field coach. Based on what I've been told, I feel good about him as an on-field coach. It's just a matter of, how is he going to play out his recruiting? I don't know. I really don't. I can't answer that. We're just going to have to wait and see. But as far as it being a good hire, so far I feel better about it than I do about the Vinny Sunseri hire. Easily, by far.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers.
Max Steinecker left for USC. I think we all acknowledge the obvious here. That's a big loss. He's really good at what he does. You have to replace. People aren't necessarily replaceable, but really good people, you have to then replace them with really good people to keep the machine running. So Marcus Sedbury is going to be the new GM. That was just announced. He's been at Wisconsin since 2022. He's been playing a pivotal role in player personnel, revenue sharing, so kind of modernizing the athletic department at Wisconsin. Previous to that, last 5 years at Baylor, where he did connection to new offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes. I like this. So I know there was an idea that you have to go raid someone else's recruiting ace, Notre Dame, LSU, Georgia, to replace Max Steinecker. I think Marcus Sedbury, by the way, Dr. Marcus Sedbury, coming in, he's going to be a 30,000-foot guy. Strategic vision, strategic view. That's his role, managing these really high-level ideas of how are we going to run this program. And I think they're still going to go get a recruiting guy, boots on the ground guy to help replace that aspect of Max. I think long-term, this could be really good. I like the hire on the surface.
I completely agree with the 30,000 foot thing. I was going to say 10,000 feet, but I like yours even better, even higher. Look, the program, college football is going in a lot of different directions, and you need someone to kind of control the program from high up to take it into this modern new world that we're living in with NIL and whatever rules are coming out from the NCAA and whether the NCAA is even going to exist. There's so many things. So you got to have someone he's got a really good resume, was at Baylor before. He definitely is a guy that I feel like can run the program like that. I totally agree. Max is like up here, like he can do it all. And Sedbury now will have a different role, and then go out and get another guy who can focus on the recruiting piece, because college sports is changing so much. And if you don't have someone on your team and in your program that can lead it from that high level and really sort of guide you through the changes that are going to be happening, that's going to put your program at a disadvantage. And having a guy that's been there, 2022. So he's already been there for 3 years. He knows the program. He understands what McIntosh's vision is, and being able to kind of go through that, I think, is really critical. So it's not done yet. We've got to fill that recruiting kind of piece of it. But on the surface, I like the internal sort of promotion, bringing in a guy who understands the culture. And we've had a theme going about sort of getting back to Wisconsin, the way Wisconsin's done it with the Grimes hire and that kind of thing. And so I feel like this kind of goes along that vein, right? Like, keep with the Wisconsin guy, make some proper changes, and then really make sure that the program itself is in good hands.
Yep, I think it's really well said. A little more background on Dr. Sedbury as well. He was a D1 athlete at Nebraska. He was a track star. He has he wasn't a football guy, but he has that perspective of being an athlete. He's been around kind of this middle of the country, Big Ten flavor his entire career, whether Nebraska, Baylor's not, but they're still Midwestern-ish. So I think it makes a ton of sense. I like it. Now, neither of us are probably experts on Dr. Sedbury and what this means. On the surface, it makes sense to me, is what I would say. I want to ask you one last question on the way out of the door, Rajiv. This is a question we got from from Bucks Dairy fan. He said, not a question, it was a comment. The Badgers have one huge weakness in basketball, defending the post. Two-part question. Do you think they have any other weaknesses? And do you think that is a huge weakness?
I think it is a weakness, especially in a particular way, right? Certainly defending the pick and roll when you play guys like Wolf and Golden at Michigan. But yeah, I think defending the post is a problem for us because we don't have the physicality that, let's say, a guy like Trey Kaufman-Wren has, or maybe some of the other guys in the conference. And Nolan Winter doesn't really have that physicality yet. Crowd doesn't either. So that is a weakness. As far as other weaknesses, I think it's really just the ability to score in the post routinely. We can score from three really well, and certainly Crowell can score in the post, but I've never thought Winter is doing enough in the post. I think he just should be given more opportunities. You've mentioned Tanjay in the post. We need to be able to score more with our back to the basket, which was a staple of Bo Ryan teams for years. And I wish this team did a little more of that. So I think just in the paint in general, not necessarily driving and getting the scoring, because we're doing that with some of those guys, but scoring with your back to the basket in the post. I think scoring and defending the post.
It's almost a little more offensive versatility. I can see that. I want to nitpick a little bit on, because there's a reason I put this on there. I think sometimes when you see people score in the post, you immediately put the eyes on Crowell, right? And it's very similar to a quarterback throws a pick, right? You look at the quarterback. It could be the left tackle got beat and he was rushed. It could be the receiver ran the wrong route. We saw some of that last year with Trechka Kahuna. A lot of our issues at the rim, it deals with perimeter defense to me. Like, it feels like quicker guards get in the paint, and then we look at Crowell for not blocking shots. We're not great defending. We're not a great post defensive team. I actually think Crowell's okay positionally. When he gets to just play man up on a guy, he's big, he's a veteran, he knows what he's doing. He's not going to blank an elite center, but he's okay there. I think partially our perimeter defense is a huge component of this. And that's, to me, that's kind of the weakness, right? Allowing people to get in the paint and then not being able to shut that off when they get there.
I think that's a very fair point. You're absolutely right, right? Like, that is an issue that we have to fix. And it's not really something that's going to be fixed this year. We just have to deal with it and outscore the other team, because that's just how we're going to win now. But yeah, no, that's a good shout. Because I agree with you. Even in the last game we just played against Purdue, I thought that there were definitely times where Crowell was positionally stronger, especially better than Winter in that positional regard. But yeah, hopefully we can slowly make some improvements and stop letting these guys just, slash their way into the lane all the time.
Yeah, that's also nitpicking. Like, I'll be very clear, this team is really good. Now, like, you can always find a weakness somewhere. This team is really, really good, and I don't know if there's many other weaknesses, which is a testament to how good this team is. It's deep, it's versatile. We could talk about the lack of a point guard, but the way Klesman's been playing lately, and Tanjay, Crowell, and Blackwell can all pass the ball pretty well. Kamari McGee, I don't know if playmaking's an issue anymore. Carter Gilmore's a pretty doggone good passer as a forward. So I don't know if there's too many holes on this team. I do think the perimeter defense and the post defense, to your point, those kind of work together. I think that is an issue we've seen. I think against really athletic perimeter defensive teams, we can get pushed out a little bit. Like, we can struggle a little bit initiating our offense. We've seen that in spurts. But dude, this team is really good, and we're searching for weaknesses right now, which is a testament to how good this team is.
Yeah, and I will say, covering up some of those weaknesses, like you just mentioned with Klesman, kudos to him. He's had 6 assist games a couple times now, and knowing that he hasn't been shooting the three very well. I mean, he's on paper, he's like our one of our worst 3-point shooters, but he also is one of the most trusted 3-point shooters. It's kind of odd to see that he's 28%. But his ability to do the other things and create, which he's doing now, and penetrating and taking the ball all the way to the rim and finding passes, kicking it to the corners. Like, he's doing a lot of those things that are covering up one of those weaknesses. We talk about it's hard to change a team that much in midseason, but Matt Klesman's really doing it. I mean, he's really taking over that point guard position, and we don't want John Blackwell to have to do that. And that's good. It's good for him to be more of that 2 guy. And yeah, I think that we are seeing some growth, especially from him. And he really stepped up, kind of like Crowell early in the season, didn't have the best time, stepped up. Well, now Max is stepping up, and it's like this team is almost peaking at the right time. Like, there is a path to a conference title. It is out there, and we can definitely do it. But starts tomorrow, right? We've got to get this win against Illinois.
Also be helpful if Ohio State doesn't airball a 5-foot shot against Michigan.
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm like, oh wow, what a he got great penetration. And I was watching that game, Michigan. We really need, if you're not sure what we're talking about, Michigan should have lost to Ohio State yesterday, but did not because their point guard missed a 5-footer, airballed the 5-footer.
Airballed it. It's the worst shot I've seen in the history of basketball.